There's a man going round taking names, and he decides who to free and who to blame. Everybody won't be treated all the same. There'll be a golden ladder reaching down when the man comes around.
Aloha. It is Tuesday, July 9th, 2013 at 12:07 p.m. Hawaii Standard Time, and you are tuned in to Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli, coming to you live from the reality of the Diamond Guidance. And if you are tuned in for the first time, Take Liberty is a social commentary for you, the callers, to discuss the issues that we are facing today at the local, state, national, and international levels. Here on Take Liberty, we believe that there are always peaceful solutions to original thought and rational conversations. We like to stay out of political positioning and demagoguery, and yes, of course, we always encourage political atheism for everyone. I am Lawrence Carnicelli, and of course, with me at the controls is the man that has a face for TV but a voice for radio, as always, Gary Forsberg.
Hello, I'd like to say hi to Larry's mom. Hi, Mom.
You know she's listening. That's the thing. It's funny. She's actually listening streaming live on KAOI1110.com. And, of course, the rest of you are probably tuned in to KAOI 1110 AM or 96.7 FM. And Take Liberty is brought to you by Maui Plumbing, 344-0642. Maui Surplus and Survival over at 900 Aha Street next to Hotspot Video. And, of course, the law offices of Kane and Heron, 242-9350. They are the attorneys with heart. And so today on Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli, we're kind of having a continuation from last week's show with the Maui Libertarian Party. And, we lost Gary there. We have back with us in the studio is Joe Kent, who is the secretary of the Maui Libertarian Party. Aloha. Thanks for coming back, Joe.
Hi. Thanks for having me on the show.
Did you have fun last week?
It was so fun. Yeah, I get really shy whenever it comes to like any political, sharing my opinion or anything. And people think that, because he has strong opinions, he must be, not shy at all about this kind of thing. But actually, the reality is I'm very shy about sharing my political views. But
well, hopefully you won't be shy over the next 51 minutes. You'll be able to just go ahead and share those with us, because I thought you did a great job last week. And
cool.
and what happened was I went and I actually watched the show because you videotaped it, and then you actually put up a YouTube video. And if you guys want to, you can go to the Facebook page, Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli, and you can actually click on, there's a link there, and you can watch that show if you want to see just what either one of us look like, and and just the magic of radio, I guess, turned into TV. I believe you're actually going to put that on a Kaku as well.
I'll put that on Kaku Public Access along with some other shows that I'm putting on. Today, actually, there's going to be something called the Maui Libertarian Show, and that premieres today at 3 o'clock on Channel 55.
So Channel 55 Akaku at 3 o'clock is the Maui Libertarian Show.
Right, and we just sort of talk about different issues from a libertarian perspective.
That's awesome.
Is that live today at 3?
No. No, it's pre-recorded.
Oh, okay,
yeah.
okay.
Oh, cool. That's very, very cool. So if you guys want to, if you enjoy some of the things that Joe has to say, or if you don't enjoy some of the things that Joe has to say, you can also tune in over there at Kaku. And actually, I'm a little bashful because right now you're videotaping again. It's just so hard not to. It's like when I talk about it, I see the camera, but when I'm just having the conversation with you, I don't. So I'm going to just jump into. So today, really kind of what I want to do is I want to talk a little bit again about what libertarians are and what they're not. But the question that I want to throw out to everybody that's listening today, and I do want to actually, before I go there, I'm going to give a shout out. There's a few people that listen to the show that have come up to me personally and say, wow, I listen to your show. I really like the show, but I would never call in. And so I guess there's a couple of people. There's Liz, who actually lives in Haiku, and she gets in her Jeep and she drives around for an hour to listen to the show. So I just want to thank Lizzie for that. Bud and Daryl over in Haiku, my buddy Demko in on the mainland listening, live streaming, Jonathan Todd, and of course my friend Don, I believe, who's on island right now, he's listening as well. So those people, if you want to call in, you can. And also and I've gotten feedback as well, people saying that it sounds like only my friends call. That's not true. I'm just polite to people. So if you call in, I'm going to make it sound like you're my buddy too. So anybody can call in. But today's topic, what I want to talk about is freedom. And from the perspective of government, and typically when things go wrong, when there's bad things that happen, the knee-jerk reaction for government most of the time is to take freedoms away rather than, say, to give more freedoms. And from a libertarian perspective, I know that that's a lot of times what you try to talk about to people is going, well, wait a second, what instead of the government coming in here and taking this away and telling us what to do and what not to do, and telling us that we have to stop doing something, like because one guy did one bad thing, everybody has to stop doing a particular thing, and we're going to restrict everybody's freedom because there's some bad people around. And so sometimes the answer is, well, we can actually give more freedom, and that would actually solve the problem. And so that's kind of where I want to go with it with you, Joe.
Well, I mean, on that, libertarians are all about freedom. So just for those that don't know what a libertarian is, Republicans like freedom here, but not there. Democrats like freedom there, but not here. But libertarians like freedom everywhere. And so as a consequence, we become the strongest advocates for liberty. And but what you were saying is that you're absolutely right. Whenever there's a problem, most people think, oh, how can we take freedoms away? But and I think that stems from a lot of people are just afraid of liberty. Most people have the idea that they've lived in under big government their whole lives, and so the idea of freedom here or there is a scary idea to most people. So that's the job of us who believe in the ideas of liberty, to try to explain what would the world look like if we had freedom in all these different areas.
I think that's fantastic, and we're going to explore that. But I believe we actually have a caller. We haven't even given out the phone number yet, but we got a caller calling in. Aloha, you are live on the air. We're live on the air. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
It's Sam from Pukalani.
Hey, Sam. Thanks for calling in, brother. What do you got for us?
Well, the government can never afford to waste a crisis. And the government is like a cancer. If it doesn't keep growing, it dies. And you'll never see any bureaucracy ever do away with itself because they're self-serving. And that's basically it with government. You can't stop them. They're in competition with small business, and they get their money from small business. And they don't really care how many small businesses they kill off, as long as there's some other small business coming up to try and fill the hole in the dike and pay the taxes. So that's basically what you got with government.
Well, I guess here's my question, though, Sam, is you said that there's nothing we can do. Do you really believe that? Do you believe that? I mean, there's 330 plus million of us, and there's 546 of them over in D.C. Do you really feel that there's nothing we can do? Has it gone so far over the tipping point that it's all downhill from here, and we just got to hold on to our britches?
We can't even get more than 50% of the people in the country who are eligible to vote. So you get what you get what you ask for.
I guess do you think that there's anything that we could do to change that, to actually get people to care?
Retake over the educational system and start teaching kids what's really going on, not what they get brainwashed with now.
Okay, so you're saying so right now we have a public school system. So you're saying, should we privatize schooling? Are you saying that that's maybe what we should do, is privatize it to get people educated beyond the confines of what it is the government wants us to know and not know?
I think that's the place to start. I think in the somewhere around the 8th or 9th grade, you got to give kids tests, and you got to decide, unfortunately for them, who's going on to college and who's going into trade school, so we can actually get people trained for what they really have an aptitude for. There's just a few things that have to be done, but unfortunately the political correctness police would arrest me and throw my ass in jail before I could say boo if I was in charge. Gotcha.
Well, I have to say I totally agree with the idea of privatizing the education system. When I was in middle school, it was one of the worst experiences of my life, right? Not because of, there were teachers there, they did okay, but it was because of the bullies and the system. And I was bullied every day. I could barely learn a single thing. And most people I talked to who went to middle school say the same thing. They hated middle school. I mean, I wish I could have just skipped out of school, and if I had just worked in a regular job, just put me to mow lawns or to work in some kind of orchard field or something, I'll bet you I would have learned a lot more than I ever did in middle school. And I'd be go ahead.
If we had the system in place that I'm suggesting, those bullies would have been sent off to a camp to chop wood. So
right. Yeah.
You would have been left alone to learn something.
Yeah, and that's the other thing is that when it comes to bullies in a classroom, sometimes it's hard. A lot of times it's hard for the parents to do anything about it. I had a friend who she went to her kid's classroom and she saw this bully bullying the teacher, and she complained to the principal. She complained to a lot of people, but at the end of the day, all the laws and all the regulations prevented her and even prevented the teacher from being able to do anything about it.
Well, see, that guy would have been shipped off to MMA, and he'd be cage fighting right now.
Going back to the gladiator days. All right, Sam, I really appreciate you calling in. I also appreciate you listening. Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Yeah. So, Sam brings up a lot of great points. And but we're up against a break right now. So what we're going to do is we're going to pay a couple of bills. We'll come back, and then we're going to jump right back into solutions that are more freedom rather than less. Aloha, welcome back to Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli, brought to you by the law offices of Kane and Herron, the attorneys with heart. They are the preferred law firm of activists, revolutionaries, and patriots of all kind. If you are exercising your God-given or constitutionally protected rights and the man keeps you down, call Kane and Herron, 242-9350. That's 242-9350. Tell them that Lawrence sent you, and Pistol Pete will give you a hookup over there. So welcome back to the show. With me in the studio is Joe Kent, the secretary from the Maui Libertarian Party. Aloha, Joe. Welcome back.
Aloha.
To the show from last week. But what we're talking about today is, and we've opened up the phone lines already, 242-7800, 242-7800. If you want to call in, and you don't have to be a friend of the show, all you have to do is have an opinion and want to have a conversation. But what we're talking about, I think, essentially is trust versus control.
Right.
I think that's really when we talk about government and you say, okay, and again, I'm throwing out this ambiguous thing as far as like, okay, if some bad thing happened, quote unquote. And let's start using some examples here, Joe, let's just talk about school shooting. Okay. So we suddenly have, a kid goes in and he shoots up a school, and our immediate knee-jerk reaction is we have to restrict the rights of everybody to carry a gun, and that's the solution to it. But before I get your answer, we've got a caller that called in, and so I just want to hear what they have to say. Aloha, caller. You're live on the air with Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli. What is your name, and where are you calling from?
Guess who, guys?
All right, Gary.
Hey, Joseph.
How are you doing?
Someday I'd like to meet you in person. We can have a really wonderful
Absolutely. That would be so fun.
I think part of the thing is that we need to kind of remember that our organizational system, our government, and I remember reading this at one time, us versus Brit. In the USA, you're free to do anything we don't tell you you can't do. We have to come up and say, you can't do this before we're not free to do it. And like in Britain, the business and all that, is you have to go get permission to do something first. So a little bit of that knee-jerk reaction is, how do we protect people from bad things happening as well? Then this bad thing happened, we wanted to stop it. And I'm not suggesting that that's always the right case, but it's kind of where the mindset starts.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to bad things happening, the world is filled with counterintuitive things. I think most things in the world are actually counterintuitive. And when you really dig into the problem, sometimes the knee-jerk solution is actually causes a bigger problem. When it comes to the school shooting thing that you were talking about, Lawrence, I used to live in Minnesota, and I was talking to a former student at the school that I teached at, and he said, we used to actually keep our guns in our lockers. And I was like, what? He said, oh, yeah, we'd keep rifles and guns in our lockers. No one really cared because we were going to go hunting afterwards, and no one really thought about it. The janitor would keep a gun in the janitor's closet, and he'd lock it up and make, it was like, okay. And there were no school shootings then. It's only when the government banned guns in the schools that we've had all the school shootings, because obviously that's a safe place to shoot people, is where no one has any guns.
Well, and Gary, here's the thing, though, that I've thrown out before, and I'm going to go two different directions with you to try to make my point, and that is, we talk about 10 and 0, right? 10 being totalitarianism and 0 being anarchy. Anytime you move from 0, it's taking away freedoms, and it's also okay taking away freedoms and civil liberties. So anytime you move away from that, but the other part is, and I've talked about this on the show before, I believe when you were here in the studio on Color Appreciation Day, and that was, anytime the government, you have to go get a license for something. So as much as you said, like, oh, in Britain you have to go get permission for everything, but here you don't. Here you have to go get a business license. Anytime you have to get a license for something, that means it's actually illegal to do that thing. And you have to go to the government to get permission. So to run a business, you have to go get a license from the DCCA. So the thing is, it's actually illegal to conduct business unless you go get permission. It's illegal to get married unless you go get permission. It's illegal to go fishing unless you go get permission. So in a way, if we start looking at it like that, going, oh wow, all these things I have to go get a license for, they are illegal. But the government says we can do them, so we don't really look at it that way because it's just like, oh yeah, I got to just go get a driver's license.
I agree with that. Well, let's take the driver's license as an example now. So do you want a 10-year-old out driving on the road?
No, and see, this is the part.
Sorry,
go ahead.
There's a point, and like so many things I talked about today is there's the balance, and the full to the left at 0 and full to the right at 10, and not meaning liberal or conservative right, just left and right on the
right.
Where you look at a gas gauge.
Right.
Neither one of those work. It has to be a compromise. And we
Agreed.
talk about anytime you get more than one person in a room together, somebody's going to compromise on something.
Right.
Depending on, I wanted to sit in that chair. Okay, well, fine. If you want to sit in that chair every time, don't allow anyone else in the room. But if you want to have a conversation with someone else in the room, maybe you're going to have to give up that chair.
Right. Or you're going to have to play Duck, Duck, Goose.
Yeah, there you go. It's flip a coin to see. But even if you do that and you lose, you still lose the right to sit in the chair that you want to sit in.
Right, and
that goes because you've agreed to those rules.
Well, I think when it comes to people with liberties bumping up against each other, you mentioned if you have freedom and I have freedom, then our liberties bump up against each other. What solves that is property rights, because property rights outlines the different lines around society where your freedom ends and mine begin. And so a strong theory of property rights is essential for a society based on liberty. What the problem is
who enforces that property right?
Right. The problem is when the government
from last time even
right.
I didn't outcome here is the property right. Your right to your property in anarchy is only as good as my inability to take it away from you if I want it.
Right.
Or your ability to defend it.
Right. And so that's why natural property rights emerge in stateless societies all the time. People defend their property and they defend the right to their, let's say I have a really long piece of property. It's this huge piece of land, but I can't actually defend if anyone can come on it or not. Maybe I can build a fence, but they can hop the fence, right? So I have to hire some kind of security to try to protect my property. If let's say there's a couple chairs in this very studio, why don't I just go ahead and take the chairs home? I mean, I'm just going to take it in their mind. But if I did that, then you would stop me. I mean, property rights are based on the individuals who enforce them.
Exactly, their own enforcement, and then again, you come down. Who's the biggest meanest? You were talking about the bullies,
right?
Without a society around us to restrict that, then the bullies have everything because they're the biggest, strongest, meanest people in the room.
See, and I agree with you, Gary, and we use our extremes to make a point, the 10 and 0, but you're right. I mean, that's just, it's not realistic to live at 0. And so it's like, okay, and I think you said that you're like a 4.5, and, Joe says that he's a 3, so to me, the other part that I have a hard time with, say, going the closer you get to 0, like you said, is the bullies win. And you say, like, okay, well, how can you get away from the bullies winning? Is you then take them to court and you use the court system. Well, I've had enough experience in the court system to know that the court system has nothing to do with what's right or wrong. It has nothing to do with justice. Our court system is so flawed that it's all about persuasion and how you can present evidence and who has the best attorney. That's all. So now to suddenly say, like, okay, I'm going to take the government away and I'm going to do nothing but property rights and you can sue people. A, you have to sue them after the fact. And B, it is that it's just like there's nothing to say that justice is going to prevail anyway. So
also, there's a little, to me, there's a fallacy to that argument in that you're accepting that the court system is not part of our government, but it is.
Oh, absolutely it is, but it's still flawed.
Oh, then you've got no recourse. You go back, you say, well, I sue them, but if there's no government and no court system and enforcement in that, why bother? Just take out your bigger gun.
Well, no, but I think the one thing about libertarians, if you listen to libertarians, one of the things that they actually do feel the government should do is to protect property rights, and they would leave the court system in place. I think that's the one difference. They're not saying remove it. Is libertarians aren't anarchists. They're not saying no government. What they're saying is, okay, there's limited government. One of the functions with which is to go ahead and leave the court systems in place so I can sue and protect my property rights if the bully comes in and takes them.
That's true, but there are examples of free market courts out there too, and I totally agree that yes, if we want to leave the courts to the government, fine. But there are all kinds of examples. Look at when we've got a really slow court system and two businesses have a disagreement, and so what do the businesses do? A lot of times they'll skip the courts and they'll go to arbitration, where they pick their own judge and jury, and they agree that, well, whatever the judge says, then we're going to agree to. Now, they would never agree to a judge or jury that showed themselves to be I have a poor opinion, maybe always favored one guy or the other. So they have to find a third party that would always be impartial. And this happens in the free market a lot. And so to say that courts could only be run by government is actually a fallacy.
Okay. Well, and Gary, we're up against a break.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Just real quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
I don't know if this is proper or not, but if you could give Joseph my number, I'd love to speak to it.
Okay, I'll do that, actually.
That would be great. I would love it.
Yeah, that would be good. And maybe the three of us could actually go out and have some poo-poos and have a conversation. I'd enjoy to listen to the two of you guys go back and forth as well.
I really enjoy that.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mike. Aloha, guys.
All right, thanks, Gary.
Aloha, Gary.
Gary's an FOS. He's a friend of the show.
Awesome.
So, and actually, Gary here in the studio, Gary Forsberg, my mom texted me. That was the little bling that you heard earlier, and she said hi back. She actually says that she wanted to say hi, and she is listening. So,
cool. Hi, Mom. I mean, not my mom, but...
All right, guys, we're going to pay a couple of bills. We'll be right back in 90 seconds. All right, guys, welcome back to Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli, brought to you by Maui Surplus and Survival. And as we said, as the ad said at least, the slide into anarchy and apocalypse won't be complete without a visit to Maui Surplus and Survival. And, of course, it's better to prepare a year too early rather than a day too late. And I say every week that, we cannot guarantee that the prices are going to be the same the day after the apocalypse as they are the day before. So go over to 900 Aha Street in Wailuku next to Hotspot Video and visit Maui Surplus and Survival. I am Lawrence Carnicelli, and of course with me in the studio is the Maui Libertarian Society or Maui Libertarian Party Secretary, Joe Kent. Thanks for coming back again, Joe. And what we're talking about, and guys, you can call in here at 242-7800. That's 242-7800. You can also go over to the Facebook page at Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli. You can post something if you don't want to call. And next week I promise to have an email address for those of you that don't Facebook. You don't Facebook, or you can actually tweet us as well. I mean, it's Take_Liberty over there at Twitter if you want to do that, but I doubt that anybody's tweeting us at this point in time. But what we're talking about is freedom versus control, and the government's role in that, and how can we solve some of the problems by giving more freedom rather than less. And one of the things that I guess that I was thrown a question at last week after you were on the show by a buddy of mine, John Hamilton, who lives in Hong Kong, who listens to the show, and he actually said, okay, why has libertarianism never been tried ever in the history of the world? Like there's never, like we said, like, listen, we've tried socialism, we've tried communism, we've tried fascism, we've tried all kinds of isms, but we've never tried libertarianism. I mean, why do you think that there's never been a nation ever to try that?
Well, I think all of society, if you look at the history of the world, societies have been ruled by oppression. I mean, that's just been the nature of humanity, is that one group tries to capture another, and eventually they rise to power, and then they become a king. And a lot of people, don't really question, well, how were kings invented? Kings were actually just barbarians that took over their societies and took over. Liberty is based on vigilance, and it's the vigilance of the people to protect liberty. Our Constitution is a worthless document unless we protect it. The ideas of liberty are completely useless unless we stand up for them. And I think with the internet, which is, again, a great example of at least an electronic libertarian society, the ideas of liberty are spreading more and more every day.
So you're basically saying the reason why it hasn't been tried is because the government really wants control. And so to then say, okay, we're going to try something that doesn't give us control. Because really, if you're in anarchy, it's just from anarchy, somebody will rise in control. If you just look at any revolution, anytime, it hits the fan, there is a dictator, if nothing else. Typically, a dictator rises out of anarchy. And so what you're saying is there's no way that some dictator who rises out of anarchy is going to say, okay, I want to go ahead and have only a 3 on the scale of 0 to 10 in control, rather than saying, okay, I want 9 or 10.
Look at Somalia. A lot of people point to Somalia as, oh, you libertarians, do you want to go live in Somalia? They're a stateless society. Their government fell in 1991. And if you really take a close look at what has happened in Somalia, yes, they are stateless, but 500,000 people have flooded into the country after the fall of their former communist government. And so people are flooding into this country, and they're creating, yes, compared to our cell phones and iPhones, it doesn't seem like much, but compared to what they had, it's enormous prosperity. I mean, education, food, water, clothing, civil rights are all up in under a stateless society. Now, in that stateless society, they've got different groups, different private security groups that protect different communities, and each of these private securities is okay with the balance of power. They've agreed to peace, but what's happening right now is the UN is coming in and shipping in all kinds of guns, and they're trying to pick one group over another. And when that happens, that causes all the other groups to have to try to rise to power and to defend against that. And so that's where you see all this fighting. But I don't think that if people were armed with the ideas of liberty, then I honestly think that it could truly work.
Okay, so let's go to, I guess, a couple of specific examples as far as how do you think that you would feel. And guys, you too can be part of the conversation here. 242-7800. That's 242-7800. Or you can hit us on the Facebook page at Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli. And so I know last week you said, okay, the things that the government should be in control of was
courts, and then police, and probably jails and the environment.
Jails and the environment.
The military.
Military. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's go to the borders. I mean, what do you feel as though the role of the government is in the borders? If you could just kind of condense it down into sort of okay, they should do. I mean, not to limit you, but just to say, okay, what is it that we should do? Should the government be involved in protecting our borders?
Yeah, that's a tough one when it comes to there's a few issues that libertarians themselves are split on, and that's one of them. Borders, I'd say we're split probably 40-60. Same thing with abortion, and so. I guess my personal opinion when it comes to borders is that we should open them, and if people want to come in and work, then that's okay. The argument against borders that that means there's going to be a flood of people coming into our society, but we have babies all the time. I mean, babies are introduced into our society too, and they're put to work when they grow up, and they they contribute a lot to our society. The same thing with people that would want to come in legally.
See, now is okay, and I get that, and for me, I guess when you look at the Constitution, it's one of the things that actually we should do. I think that the government they set out to do. It says, okay, it's a national defense, not a national offense. It's not, okay, we're over and we're protecting our borders by bombing somebody in Somalia or Afghanistan or Iraq. It's national defense, which means, okay, we're going to protect our own borders.
Right, and if that was the case, then you could just legalize coming into the country. And so if people wanted to come in, they would get their papers checked and they come in legally.
Okay. And so we do have another caller. Aloha, caller. You're live on the air with Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
Hi, Lawrence. This is Phil from Moscow. Still in Moscow from the last show.
Oh, hey, Phil. You're calling from an undisclosed location in the Moscow airport. I love it. What do you got for us, Phil?
Well, I got a question for both Joe and yourself.
Okay.
He was mentioning the police as one of the functions of government.
Okay.
What happens when the police violate people's rights consistently? What should happen in those circumstances?
Go ahead. I'm gonna give this one to you, since it's such an easy question.
All right. Well, I want to turn to the community of Sandy Springs. Sandy Springs, they outsourced all of their vital functions of government. So the electric company, the utility company, all the
No, hang
libraries.
on though. Is go to the point of his question though.
Right.
His question was, what do you do if the police start violating people's rights all the time?
Okay, what I'm saying is
do?
that in a libertarian society, if the police were outsourced, then you could hire a different police company that wouldn't violate people's rights.
Okay, so we would just fire the police department. So if they weren't public employees, then we would say, okay, you know what, you guys are bad people. So we're gonna hire Halliburton, or I think they got a different name now, but we're basically gonna hire Halliburton to police our streets, is what you're saying.
We'll hire McDonald's or hire a Walmart police force, and maybe they could do it, with a smile. I mean,
okay,
you have competing private market.
Okay, does that work for you, Phil? What do you think about that? I mean, where do you think that we should go in that?
I like the idea. I don't like I mentioned last week. I want to make sure they're held accountable. And
so how do we hold them accountable then?
Well, if they have to be fired, that's the first step, and unfortunately, it's very, very, very difficult to do that. Most of the time, they might get slapped with a week suspension at the most, and a lot of the time they're get paid on that suspension.
Right, is because of the unions. I mean, so what we have, I mean, and that's, I think, a whole nother conversation and a whole nother show that we need to have as far as, public employees, unions, and the strength that they have and the numbers that they have to be able to, to do that. And that's really, and I'm not saying that unions are good or bad. All I'm saying is when you have a police officer that does something that's egregious, then typically because of the contract between the county and the police union, that guy's just put on, leave, but it's paid leave. So, is there really a deterrent for a police officer to do something bad if the worst thing that's going to happen to him is he's put on, paid leave? I
mean, if the responsibility to enforce proper government falls on government, then government will always rule in its favor. So if the courts are meant to police the courts, then obviously the courts are going to rule in favor for whatever they do, and that's been the tragic course of history in America.
So, I mean, Phil, and you said that you're actually a fairly liberal, quote unquote, libertarian. Do you feel that privatization would work?
I'm not sure if it'll work, but it's not working right. A lot of times, it's not working right now. I believe there will probably be some private individuals violating people's rights. But when that happens, and especially they catch it on camera, and they have to give a check every single month, people will stop sending the checks in, and for that protection service. So I think it'll probably get better if that were to be the case. But,
then here's what I want to do then is I want to throw out the question then is how does the question I started the show with, the premise of the show to me was that this particular show is how can we solve this issue with more freedom and not less? So we have a situation. We have police officers. Again, you're just giving a hypothetical. You say a police officer does something egregious. How can we actually increase people's, the collective's freedoms and solve this rather than taking away freedoms?
I think that it's really not that far-fetched to sell off the police station. I mean, and then let's say you put it up for bid every year, right? So every year the police station has to try to be good stewards, and if they weren't, then they lose their money. And right now, if you get something stolen, then you go up to a policeman and you say, "Hey, look, I got my car was broken into." What incentive does the policeman have to find your stolen goods? I remember that happened to me once. I went to a police station and I said, "Hey, my car was broken into. They stole all my stuff." And I said, "Can you find it?" And they just started laughing at me, right? But if it was insured, right? If my stuff was insured, then the insurance company would have a lot of motivation to try to find the stuff, because if they found my stuff, then they wouldn't have to pay me that money and they'd make a huge profit. So there are a lot of free market solutions. There's all kinds of free market solutions when it comes to private security. And the point is that in a free society, the best solutions would bubble to the top. And it could actually be that that security, that a stateless society could actually be more safe and secure than the society that we live in today.
And you know what, Phil, we are up against a break. We've got to go ahead and take a break again. But I appreciate you listening in. And that was, guys, that's Phil Heath, who's also a member of the Maui Libertarian Party. But Joe, you said something that I thought was really interesting about abortion, that there's a split in the Libertarian Party about abortion. And I would have thought there was zero split in the Libertarian Party because of that. But I want to go ahead and I'm going to have that conversation with you right after the break.
Anarchy is...
All right, guys, aloha. Welcome back to Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli, brought to you by Maui Plumbing. Hardworking, honest, talented, fast, and friendly plumbers. You can call them for an appointment over at 344-0642. That's 344-0642. Guys, they answer their phone and they show up on time. And I know that may sound like not that big a deal, but here on Maui, that is a huge deal if you answer your phone and you show up on time. And so I am Lawrence Carnicelli, and in the studio with me is Joe Kent, who's the secretary of the Maui Libertarian Party. And we're having a conversation about liberty, and we're talking about control and the government's involvement in that. And you can get involved in the conversation at 242-7800. That's 242-7800. You can also hit us over at the Facebook page, which is Take Liberty with Lawrence Carnicelli. And so, Joe, before the break, I was sitting there, I was taken a little bit aback by the fact that you were talking about Border Patrol and how there's a little bit of split in the Libertarian Party on that, and then there was a split with abortion, because this is how I've always taken the Libertarian Party to be, is that it is principle-based, it's not value-based. That when you look at the Democrats and the Republicans, they get wrapped up in, well, this is my particular value on something, and let's just use abortion. I think abortion is bad. I think abortion is good. I think abortion is murder. You know, it's a horrible, horrific thing that you're going to take a life. Or on the other side of it is it's like, no, you know what? It's a woman's body. She has a right to choose and everything like that. And so here's, to me, as a libertarian, I think that both of those arguments are libertarian arguments. You can have a libertarian that stands there and goes like, yeah, you know what? I think it's horrible. However, the government shouldn't tell me what I can do. It's just like, yes, it is awful and it is murder, but the government shouldn't be involved, and that's the libertarian stance. And then over here, it's, guess what? It's it's a woman's right to choose, and she can do whatever you want, and so the government needs to stay out of our business. And so to me, to sit there and go, oh, wait, the libertarians are split on that, how?
Right. Well, you're exactly right. Libertarians are split because of property rights. Now, you own your own body. Your body is your property, right? So you should be able to do what you want with your own body. But when it comes to an unborn baby, is that baby a person, and does that baby own his or her own body? Because after all, libertarians are against the initiation of force. And so if you kill the baby, you're violating that baby's property rights. Now, now, if it isn't a baby, if it isn't a real person in the sense that they have a right to property, then is it okay for the mother to do what she wants with her own body? And I got to tell you, personally, I go back and forth on this one, just within myself. I mean, it depends on the last person I talk to, what I feel on this one. I mean, this is a tough one.
Sure, and I guess I see what you're saying. So it's not just, okay, we're not taking just the mother into account here, but we're also saying, okay, is the fetus or the zygote a human being?
Right.
And so if so, then that human being also has property rights. And so then therefore, if the mother has an abortion, she's violating the baby's rights.
Right. And just like you said, the value question isn't so much what I think about. It's more about, what are the principles here and how does it apply? So that's what makes it so difficult. So then,
and again, being principle-based rather than value-based is, I want to let's go to the free market and business and financials. Because here's one that for me is, if you look at, do you really think that we should let Wall Street, and I'm going to use Wall Street specifically, run without any oversight, without any government control? Because if you're going like, the four things that you named, right? Military, police, courts, and environment. That doesn't include, Wall Street. So suddenly you're going to say, okay, Wall Street's allowed to do whatever they want to do without oversight?
Yes, I think so. I think that would be a great idea. Now, they do have I'm talking about without oversight by the government. And that's different than oversight by the market itself. I'm not talking that Enron would just look at itself and try to police itself. I'm talking about all the competition around them would police the different companies. So yes, in the market, you have people who lie, cheat, and steal, and they make money. But the way to make a lot of money is to serve your customers well. I look at the executives of, for example, Enron, and a lot of people say, well, they were so greedy, they took everything, they just grabbed everything, and they didn't leave anything else for the rest of us. They were so greedy. But I think exactly the opposite is true. They weren't greedy enough, because if they were really greedy for the long term...
Are you Gordon Gekko?
Yeah, yes. If they were really greedy for the long term, for 30, 40 years down the road, they would have tried to serve their customers well so that their customers would continue picking their business.
But see, here's my only problem with that, though, Joe, is because my problem with that is Enron doesn't make anything. They don't do anything. Well, I mean, that's not true. Enron, they were just trading, they were trading energy, and so they did serve a purpose. Let's take Goldman Sachs.
Okay.
Excuse me. Goldman Sachs, basically what they do is they're a financial institution that they buy and sell stocks. They make money without making anything. They don't provide anything. All they do is they have clients. Their customers are only interested in one thing: making more money. That's all that they're in. That's all that they're about. That's all they care about. So again, this self-policing thing that you're talking about, like, oh, the free market will do that. Then you know what we did is we actually had and have rating agencies for bonds. So Goldman Sachs was going over here and they were buying and selling all these bonds, right? These mortgage-backed securities. And you know what they did is we said, oh, we have Moody's, and I forget what the other one is, the other rating agency. And we had these two rating agencies that were rating, saying, like, oh, these are AAA rated. But you know what we found out? We found out that Moody's was selling their AAA ratings to the highest bidder. So if you were Goldman Sachs, you went over and said, hey, listen, I got this new mortgage-backed security. I want a AAA rating. Moody's said, oh, okay, well, then you know what you got to do? You got to go ahead and give me $100,000 or whatever the number was. So it's just like in the free market, it's trusting that, greedy guys aren't going to just buy off the watchdog.
Right, but where is Moody's today? I mean, do people still
trust? Exist? Yes, they do. I don't know why, but they do. They're still a rating agency. I mean, they didn't go out of business.
See. Okay, to be honest, I don't really know. I haven't done the research on Moody's or all that. But
let's just take that scenario.
Yeah, I've got to say, yeah. Okay,
let's take a scenario that is you have a particular type of government or a type of industry that is then overseen instead of by the government by a private entity. What's to say that this particular industry that's being overseen by another private entity can't just pay them off?
Okay, well, let me think of this in terms of something I can understand. Video games, right? Okay, so there are a bunch of different rating agencies for video games, right?
Okay.
There's all these different magazines, and they rate this game and that game. Imagine if there was one company that tried to pay these video game magazines to puff up their ratings, right? What would happen is that as soon as the rating didn't match the game or the company, people would stop buying that magazine. They'd say, oh, that magazine, don't buy it. All their ratings are bunk. And they would go to the rating agencies that were more honest. And so I think in a free market, it works itself out. Now, when it comes to Moody's and all that, I really don't understand, that situation.
And that's fair. And I guess where I was headed with it is the further you get away from, say, some sort of oversight, some sort of neutral oversight over, say, the free market, is you're relying on the benevolence of people. And you're saying people are inherently benevolent and that they're going to do good things, and that is because essentially what happens is what crushes the free market is monopoly. Right, so even like last week, Philip brought up roads, or caller Gary brought up roads, and Phil said like we want roads to be private. However, we've got one road to Hana, right? So suddenly there's a monopoly on that particular road that whoever owned that road would have a monopoly. So that's not free market. And what happens is in the free market, bigger companies, like say if you're better, you rise to the top, and then what you do is you end up buying up all your competition. So now you have a monopoly. Now what happens?
Right. Okay. Well, when that happens, monopolies are there's one thing that monopolies are most afraid of, and that's competition. And so what do? The way that they become monopolies is they plead government to give them privilege. Look at all the monopolies in the world today, and you'll find that behind each and every monopoly is a government privilege that prohibits other people from entering the market. And so I have to say, most monopolies, and a natural monopoly that occurs without government, is extremely rare. And even if it did exist, the threat of someone entering the market. So let's take the example of a road to Hana. The road to Hana is a monopoly, but if they rose their price to $1 million a car that drove on the road, then another person could come in and make a different road that would be cheaper.
And I mean, in theory, that's possible, but nobody's going to come in and make another road.
If it was $1 million a car, maybe.
Right? But I mean, but what you do is just nobody would end up going to Hana anymore. And guys, we're just about done here. And what I want to do is I want to thank Sam from Pukalani, and of course Gary always calls in, and Phil for calling in again this week as well. And I also want to thank some of my friends that are listening. Hi, Mom, you're listening, and I think my Aunt Marlene's listening. My father's listening as well. So thanks, guys, I appreciate it. In the next week, be really good to each other. Be nice to each other. We'll see you next Tuesday at noon. And, of course, slower traffic. Please keep right.
Be a golden ladder reaching down when the man comes around.